What if I told you that one of the most dramatic changes of the 21st century isn't happening on election nights, in financial crashes, or in breaking news headlines, but in something so quiet most people never notice it, a private decision, made in silence, behind closed doors. A growing number of men are coming to the same conclusion. I'm finished. I don't trust this anymore. They still wake up with an alarm. They still answer emails. They still show up to work, reply in group chats, hit the gym, crack jokes. On the surface, life continues. But beneath the routine, something has gone numb. The part of them that once believed in romance as a life mission. The part that dreamed of building a home with someone. The part that saw love as a safe place to land. That part has quietly powered down. By the time you finish this, you won't just have a label for that feeling. You will see the pattern beneath it, a pattern that stretches from old, collapsing civilizations to the notifications on your phone. You will understand why so many men are quietly done with women, and why that decision, as harsh as it sounds, may be the first honest step toward a different kind of freedom. Because this is not only about women, it is about trust. About what happens inside a man when the story he was promised about love no longer matches the reality he lives in day after day. The disappearing fire. Something subtle has changed in the emotional climate of men. Walk through a crowded bar, a college campus, an office party, a busy gym. Listen carefully. You'll hear men talk about relationships, marriage, breakups, custody battles, crazy exes, dating apps. There is humor, there is bravado, there is sarcasm. But under the jokes, there is a heaviness that wasn't there in their grandfather's time. The older generations, for all their flaws, believed in the basic structure. You find someone, you commit, you work through the storms. You build a family and a future. For many men today, that script feels like a fairy tale written for a world that no longer exists. They've watched their parents' marriages implode. They've seen friends lose everything in courtrooms they never expected to visit. They've been told from childhood that real men stay, only to watch how quickly loyalty can evaporate the moment their value drops. So the fire goes out. Not with an explosion, but with a slow, steady loss of oxygen. The enthusiasm to pursue, to court, to invest fully, dissolves. He still dates sometimes, he still flirts, he might even fall in love. But the belief that romance is a safe foundation to build his life on, that belief has cracks running all the way through it. From the outside, this looks like immaturity, non-commitment, fear. From the inside, it feels like self-preservation, beyond the lazy man myth. When men begin to disengage from relationships, the explanations come quickly. Men are lazy now. Porn ruined them. They just want casual hookups. They're scared of powerful women. They don't know how to communicate. These statements are simple. They are comfortable. They place the problem entirely inside the man's psychology and say nothing about the environment he's moving in. Yes, some men are irresponsible. Some men do run from adulthood. Some men use the system as an excuse to avoid doing their own inner work. But if you sit with honest men, not the ones performing online, not the ones chasing validation, but the ones speaking freely behind closed doors, another story emerges. You start to hear patterns. Men who carried the financial and emotional weight of a relationship only to be discarded the moment they hit a rough patch. Men who supported their partner's dreams, then watched those partners walk away once a better option appeared. Men who thought they were building a future and suddenly found themselves moved out of the picture like a piece on a chessboard. After enough repetitions of this, the message sinks in. I'm not being chosen for who I am. I'm being rented for what I provide. This is the harsh truth beneath the cliches. The unplugging is not always a childish tantrum. Often, it is the logical reaction of someone who finally realized that the deal he thought he was making is not the deal on the table. History's harsh mirror. To see this more clearly, we have to zoom out far beyond Tinder, Instagram, or modern hookup culture. History is full of moments where men's usefulness collapsed in an instant, and with it, the stability of their relationships. Think of the Great Depression in the early 20th century. In a matter of months, proud providers went from employed and respected to unemployed and desperate. Whole communities watched factories shut down, banks fail, savings vanish. In letters from that era, in personal accounts and family stories, another pattern appears. Some wives and partners stayed in the struggle, grinding through hardship. Others quietly left, seeking security elsewhere, telling themselves and others, "I can't risk my future." He changed. I had no choice. They weren't villains. They were responding to brutal conditions. But the men who lived through that time learned something that has never really left the male subconscious. As long as I can provide, I am worth standing beside. The moment I cannot, I become negotiable. You can trace similar patterns across wars, collapses, and crises in different countries and cultures. This doesn't mean all women are disloyal. It means that, at a population level, when survival feels threatened, affection often submits to calculation. Fast forward to today. Most people in the West are not facing famine or world wars. The danger is more subtle. The survival instinct has shifted from physical survival to status, comfort, and lifestyle. Instead of wondering, "Will my children eat?" many now wonder, "Will my life feel as good as hers? Could I do better? Am I wasting my prime years?" The instinct hasn't disappeared. It has simply changed costume. The modern man in the feed. Now picture a man today. Let's call him Nathan. Nathan works in IT. He isn't a millionaire, but he's stable. He pays his rent on time, looks after his body, tries to be kind. He grew up believing that if he was a decent man, one day he'd meet someone who saw that and stayed. He downloads a dating app because that's how people meet now. Weeks go by. Matches flicker in and out like notifications. He finally connects with someone who seems genuine. They go on a date. He makes an effort. He chooses a nice place, arrives on time, listens, asks questions. He doesn't talk over her. He doesn't try to impress with fake stories. He pays, not to buy affection, but because it feels like the respectful thing to do. They laugh. They share pieces of their lives. They hug goodbye. On the way home, he lets himself feel a small spark of hope. The next day, he sends a simple message. "I enjoyed last night. Would be nice to see you again." The phone stays silent. Hours turn into a day turns into 3. Eventually, he sees her posting stories, out with other people, tagging new places, new faces. No giant betrayal, no dramatic breakup. Just the quiet realization that he was never actually in her life. He was a maybe, a placeholder, a possibility among dozens. Something in him hardens, not into hatred but into distance. Next time he tells himself he will care a little less. And maybe, the time after that, he won't try at all. Multiply this a few times, different women, slightly different details, same emotional pattern, and the conclusion feels less like a choice and more like gravity. This is not worth the cost. That is how a man becomes quietly done. The inner verdict. When enough experiences like this pile up, something deeper than simple disappointment takes root. It starts as weariness. Then it turns into suspicion. Eventually, for many men, it becomes a private rule. Do not give too much of yourself. They will leave when it is no longer convenient. This rule may not be entirely fair. It may not apply to every woman, but it feels safer than going blindly into the fire again. From the outside, this looks like emotional unavailability. From the inside, it feels like armor. And here is where the story usually stops. People point at the armor and say, "See, men don't commit anymore. They just want to play games. This generation is broken." Almost no one asks the question behind the armor. What happened to you that made this feel like the only rational move? Because once you ask that question honestly, you run into a wall of grief. Men grieving the family they never got to build. Men grieving the version of themselves that still believed. Men grieving years poured into relationships that dissolved overnight. And beneath that grief sits something even more important. A simple, brutal realization. I base my self-worth on a contract that was never guaranteed, and now I can't unsee it. That is the moment many men quietly walk away, not just from women, but from the entire game of chasing love as they were taught, from withdrawal to inner authority. This would be a tragic ending if the story stopped here. But for some men, this withdrawal becomes the doorway to something they never would have discovered otherwise. At first, the silence feels empty. He spends evenings alone that used to be filled with arguments, anxiety, or compulsive texting. He feels the urge to reach out, to fix, to chase. He sits on his hands instead. Days stretch. Old habits lose their grip. Some men get stuck in this phase, scrolling, numbing themselves, half alive. But others start to ask a different question. If I'm not spending my life trying to prove I am worthy of being loved, what am I going to do with all this energy? That question is the beginning of inner authority. He begins to see that for years, his identity revolved around being chosen, approved, desired. His career, his appearance, his social life, even his hobbies were secretly designed to make him more attractive in someone else's eyes. When that external reward disappears, there are two options: collapse into bitterness, or rebuild life on a completely different foundation. The men who choose the second path don't become perfect saints. They stumble, they doubt, they still feel lonely, but step by step they stop asking, what do I need to change so that someone will finally stay? And start asking, what kind of man do I want to become no matter who stays or leaves? It's a different axis of life. And this is where shadow work, self-honesty, and real inner growth stop being abstract ideas and become survival tools. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper into this, not just understanding why you feel this way, but actually integrating your own shadows and light, you might find value in the SIM Method ebook. It's a concise guide designed to help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day, so that your stability no longer depends on who chooses you or who walks away. The link is in the first pinned comment below. Because if a man doesn't transform this pain, it will simply harden into cynicism. But if he does, it becomes fuel. The sovereign man. A sovereign man is not a man who hates women. He is not a man who refuses intimacy. He is not a man proudly announcing that he doesn't need anyone. A sovereign man is someone whose sense of worth is no longer held hostage by other people's choices. He still desires connection. He still feels deeply. He can still love, but he does not negotiate his values for attention. He does not bend his entire life around the fear of being abandoned. He does not treat relationships as the central source of meaning, but as one expression of a life already rich with meaning. He invests in his body, not to be more marketable, but because he respects the vessel he lives in. He invests in his craft, not to flex a lifestyle, but because mastery gives him a quiet pride nobody can steal. He invests in his mind, reading, reflecting, questioning, because he refuses to be a passenger in his own story. He can walk away from disrespect without a tantrum. He can be alone without feeling incomplete. He can say no without terror and yes without hidden resentment. Paradoxically, this kind of man is often the one women feel most drawn to, because his presence is not begging for their approval. But here's the crucial point. At this stage, attracting a woman is no longer the objective. The objective is to live a life that you yourself would admire if you saw it from the outside. To look in the mirror and know that, even if everything external collapsed, you would still respect the person staring back. Only from that place can a relationship become what it was supposed to be all along. Not a transaction based on usefulness, but a chosen partnership between two complete individuals. You are not giving up. You are changing the terms. So why is a generation of men quietly done with women? Because on some level, they have realized that the version of love they were promised, unconditional, unshakable, guaranteed by good behavior, rarely exists in the form they imagined. They have seen how quickly affection can turn into calculation, how loyalty can evaporate when their function disappears, how their worth can be re-evaluated overnight based on income, status, or replacement value. This realization hurts. It feels like mourning a dream. For a while, it can make the world look dark and pointless, but buried inside that pain is a gift. The chance to stop living as a candidate and start living as a creator. The chance to stop chasing validation and start building inner solidity. The chance to stop begging for a seat in someone else's story and start writing your own. You don't have to swear off love forever. You don't have to turn cold. You don't have to become the villain they expect. What you do have to do, if you want real freedom, is change the terms. Stop basing your life on being chosen. Build a life that expresses who you are, with or without an audience. Let any relationship be an addition to that life, not the entire foundation. A generation of men is not just giving up, they are waking up. And for those who are willing to do the hard inner work, to face their disillusionment, to integrate their shadows, to build something solid inside, this quiet withdrawal is not the end. It is the first step toward a kind of sovereignty. No breakup, no court ruling, no algorithm and no opinion will ever be able to touch. That is the harsh truth. And it is also your chance to start again on completely different terms. The inner work that makes walking away worth it. There is a harsh truth most men eventually discover. You can walk away from toxic relationships, stop chasing, go your own way, and still feel empty. At first, the withdrawal feels powerful, almost righteous. You stop begging for attention. You stop explaining yourself to people who never really listened. You stop bending your values just to keep someone from leaving. But after the initial relief fades, something else emerges beneath the surface. A quiet question. Okay, I walked away from them, but what do I do with me now? Because the real prison was never only the relationship. It was the way you saw yourself inside it. If you don't change that, you can be single for 10 years and still carry the same wounds, the same patterns, the same hidden desperation, only now with more walls around it. You can call it independence, you can call it freedom, but if you're still haunted by the same stories, you're not free. You're just alone with your ghosts. That's why the men who truly transform after walking away are not the loudest or the angriest. They are the ones who decide to turn inward, not in self-pity, but in brutal honesty. They start asking questions like, why did I tolerate so much disrespect? Why did I think I had to perform to be loved? Why was I so terrified of being left that I left myself first? Why did I keep choosing versions of the same person in different bodies? These are not comfortable questions. They are surgical questions. They cut through the story that it was all their fault and expose something deeper, the places where you abandoned your own standards long before anyone else did. And this is where shadow work begins, not as a mystical buzzword, but as a necessity. Your shadow is everything you pushed away to survive. The anger you weren't allowed to express, the needs you were taught to be ashamed of, the boundaries you never learned to set, the power you hid because someone once told you it was too much. If you don't integrate this, you will keep doing the same thing, either chasing people to fill your emptiness or building cold armor to hide it. Both are just two sides of the same wound. This is why inner work is not a luxury for spiritual people. It's survival for men who don't want to repeat the same life twice. And here's the paradox. The more you turn inward, the less dramatic your outer life needs to be. You don't need chaos to feel alive. You don't need people to validate your worth. You don't need constant female attention to feel like a man. You begin to enjoy simpler, quieter victories, finishing something you once procrastinated, speaking the truth even when your voice shakes, saying no and actually meaning it, choosing solitude over low-quality company without feeling like you're losing anything. That's the moment you stop being just done with women and start being aligned with yourself. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and not just understand this intellectually, but actually integrate your shadows and your light, you can check out the Sim Method ebook. It's a concise guide that helps you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day, so you stop living from wounds and start living from awareness. The link is in the first pinned comment below, because here's the thing, discipline alone is not enough. You can force yourself to hit the gym, grind at work, eat clean, stack money, and still feel like something is missing. Without inner integration, all your discipline becomes a way to outrun your own reflection, and you can't outrun what lives inside you. When a man starts doing real inner work, his relationship to women changes without him even trying to act different. He no longer sees them as judges he must impress, nor as enemies he must defend against. He sees them as human beings with their own shadows, their own wounds, their own survival strategies. He stops putting them on a pedestal. He stops putting them in the gutter. He puts them back on the ground, where he is. From that place, saying no to a woman who disrespects him no longer feels like a huge act of courage. It feels natural. Keeping his standards doesn't feel like a battle. It feels like breathing. Walking away early from a situation that smells wrong doesn't feel like loss. It feels like self-respect. And when eventually he meets a woman who is also doing her inner work, someone who doesn't just want to be adored, but to grow, he doesn't cling to her out of fear. He chooses her from abundance, because his life is no longer an empty room waiting to be decorated with someone else's presence. It's a house he has already furnished with purpose, discipline, and inner clarity. If she comes in, good. If she leaves, his foundation remains. That is the real point of being quietly done with women. It is not about swearing them off forever. It is not about turning cold or becoming unfeeling. It is about being done with betraying yourself in order to be chosen, done with living as a supporting character in someone else's movie, done with confusing chaos for passion and anxiety for love. Once you have seen that clearly and started doing the inner work, the question is no longer, how do I make them stay? The question becomes, how do I stay true to myself, no matter who comes or goes? And when that becomes your central question, the withdrawal is no longer a sad ending. It is the doorway to a life that finally feels like it belongs to you.